Hello and welcome to Avid's webinar series on storage trends with Tom Coughlin. We're really excited to have you here today, and we want to thank you all for taking the time to be part of this today. So what are the goals today? First and foremost, at the end of this webinar, you should have a solid understanding of current technology and geopolitical trends that are driving storage adoption in media today, given the universe that we all live in and have lived in for the last few years. We all know it's just constantly changing. You should have a good understanding of how those trends are impacted by emerging production techniques, whether it be camera to cloud, virtualized production, distributed production, resources, all trying to collaborate together remotely. UHC production, of course, always a moving target. And then generally speaking, how are those trends sort of driving the go forward thinking in the market? So that's basically at the end of the webinar what you should be able to take away from. Now, if you have any questions throughout the course of the webinar, I would encourage you to basically use the Q&A function. If you're in the webinar room itself, if you're participating through any of these other social media platforms, first and foremost, thank you for viewing the webinar through those platforms. We will have folks monitoring those as well. So if you ask a question in those chats, we'll have those as well available for Tom and myself. We'll also have other Avid experts on the phone as well to be able to answer any of your questions. So I encourage you to please participate, ask questions as needed, and don't be shy. All right, introduction. So first and foremost, my name is Ray Thompson, and I'm Senior Director here at Avid for Partners and Alliances now. I've been at Avid for now 5.5 years. This is my second stint at Avid, and I've always been working for companies that cater to the media and entertainment industry, going on now 30 plus years. And I'm honored to have Tom Coughlin with us today. Tom, would you please introduce yourself?
Hello, I'm Tom Coughlin. I'm president of Coughlin Associates. I'm going to talk to you today about the role of digital storage in the professional media and entertainment industry. And I do an annual report and survey on this topic, as we just discussed. And I'm also going to be talking about trends in the industry and give some projections based upon the 2022 Media and Entertainment Storage Report. So remote video projects, video studios are now established production methodologies, although they have their limitations. In camera special effects, replacing some traditional post-production work. There also are people who are going direct from camera to the cloud. Collaborative post-production can span many time zones, become common. So that's driving, again, a lot of work using the cloud. And many artists can do much of their work at home or away from the studio or office. And in fact, during COVID, of course, that was oftentimes the only way that people could get work done. And that's opened up familiarity with these new technologies. It's also enabled faster production schedules, sometimes with less travel, the use of more CGI, special effects, and round-the-clock post-production. And in fact, sometimes there's special effects that can even be done in the camera. It's becoming more common as our technology improves. However, this new world depends upon cloud-based resources and also good planning in order to be effective. It's a lot harder to just spontaneously change what you're doing if you're doing everything in the camera versus doing it in post. So there's new ways of thinking about how to do production. I visited during the SMPTE 2022 technology conference, I visited Orbital Studios. And this image shows the virtual stage at Orbital Studios on the left, including an image of the camera frustum, which is on the left of that image. So that's actually what the camera is seeing. That is being projected into the camera. And also the Silver Draft servers on the right-hand side that render the content shown on the stage using Unreal Engine. So they have a very high resolution, 1.5 pixel pitch, curved LED wall that they use in this virtual set. And that allows a camera to come within 3 feet of the display. If you had not as many pixels and not as high a pixel density, you have to move further away in order not to see the artifacts. So Orbital uses an OptiTrack Prime 41 tracking system in order to know where the camera is pointing and to give it the display into the camera that you see here. And also had an Arri Alexa 35, and I believe there was a Sony camera also that was being used for demonstration purposes. Pixar was used for the video playback, and there was a 1.9 millimeter pitch planar CLI VX ceiling LED display. You can see that in the upper side of that left image. Now this LED wall, though, it does produce light, but it's often not enough lighting needs for the whole set. So auxiliary lighting is often needed. And in addition to the to a video wall, you'd also, of course, have things would be in the foreground that, for instance, actors would be working around that would blend in with the video wall. So an important element in this virtual production is to get the degree of complexity for a scene, to get all the things in the scene that are possible, both the image and the motion of the camera, and that reduces the need to do things in post. So it has the potential, if you do your planning well, of being able to do faster production work. And the overhead required to render images real time, though, drives server and memory performance. Also, rendering tends to require input and output requests for data to come in bursts. Current virtual environments require something like 20 to 50 gigabit per second, communication over 100 gigabit per second networks. As a consequence, a significant amount of fast memory, generally that's DRAM, although there are new memory technologies out there now as well, is required. Now, streaming services are now the dominant media delivery method. Lower production costs have resulted in a slew of new content, many created by streaming services funding their own production. And part of that's helped by reducing the cost of production itself. In-person movie theaters have returned. You can see that, for instance, The Way of Water and other new productions are bringing people back to the theaters and providing experience that you can't get at home, but they're still struggling to get attendance back to pre-COVID levels. Now, there's other things going on in the video that we're capturing as well. 360-degree and more immersive video, say volumetric video, things of that sort, remains currently a niche market, but new technologies, I'll talk about this in a little bit, could drive demand for this content. Artificial intelligence is also being used increasingly in media and entertainment applications. It can be used to analyze content, to generate useful metadata tags, can also be used to find and characterize content. And this can include speech-to-text generation, speech recognition, image recognition, to tag actors, locations. Camera location information can also be useful for these applications. You can get various other useful metadata that helps with the acquisition, the use, and the ultimate curation of this content for archive or for use later on. Now, a talk at this SMPTE conference by Ha Nguyen of Warner Discovery and Niall Wilson of Microsoft talked about using machine learning to archive only the action portion of video dailies, identifying the start and stop of each scene. They worked with 45 long footage of an action movie split across 191 video files. They pointed out that many frames had a lot of image redundancy, and that could be eliminated in order to reduce the storage requirements. They also talked about using utterance detection as another method to reduce content storage, and they reported overall a reduction in storage cost by about 44%. Other important developments include sophisticated algorithmic video editing, some types of 3D pre-visualization, which is useful, or light field imaging. And again, we'll get a little more into that as emerging technologies a little bit later. So let's look at some, in the first half of 2022, Coughlin Associates conducted its annual survey of media and entertainment professionals. And we've done this for over 10 years now on their use of digital storage technologies. For those involved in content capture, the 2022 survey showed that the majority captured their content on flash memory. About 80% is what we saw, with some also captured on hard disk drives. Now, hard disk drives would be mainly used where you've got a fixed set, so you don't have to jostle it, but it has lower cost storage. For the right kind of content, it can handle the rate of capture of ingest. While flash memory dominates for capture in the field or with mobile cameras. In 2022 also, 37% of the survey participants said they captured 6 hours or more of original content for an hour of completed work. And 25% said they captured between 11 and 50 hours for a single hour of complete content. 29% used external storage devices to capture content in 2022. On the post-production side, again, this is results from the survey. Workflows can use local storage and memory as well as network memory, and also increasingly they use cloud storage, as we mentioned before, particularly if they're doing collaborative work. In the 2012 through 2022 surveys, we asked whether survey participants used cloud-based storage for editing and post-production. And in 2022, 46% roughly of the responding participants said yes. Our surveys have shown that the use of network storage increases with the size of a post-production facility, and the use of direct attached storage decreases, but it never goes to zero. 63% of the 2022 participants said they used direct attached storage in 2022. 1 to 50 terabyte was most common direct attached storage sizes, about 67% of the participants this year. 69% had NAS or SAN in 2022. 50% had 50 terabytes, or more of network storage in 2022. On the content distribution side, there's many channels this happens. It can use physical media for getting content to digital cinemas, as shown on the left, this photo on the left-hand side here, or to consumers, or it can be done electronically using broadcast cable or satellite transmission, or through the internet or mobile phone networks. In 2022, DVD discs, hard disk drives, and flash memory are the most popular physical distribution formats. If you go to the content distribution, content delivery networks, an example what that schematically may look like, as shown on the right-hand side here, we found the average hours on a central content delivery system of our participants was about 2,183 hours in 2022. And there was an average of 50 hours ingested monthly into delivery servers in 2022. On archiving, the options available for archiving media to store digital content depends upon the preferences and existing infrastructure of a digital archive facility. Digital tape was the most common storage media at 32% of our survey participants in 2022, followed by private or public cloud at about 21%, local storage networks at 20%, and external storage at 18%. Some various optical disk formats were about 8% of archiving. In 2022, about 33% had greater than 2,000 hours of content at a long-term archiving. 4.4% of the participants had over 5,000 hours of unconverted analog content. And the average rate of analog to digital conversion in our survey was about close to 7% in 2022. And we asked respondents that were involved in digital archiving whether they used magnetic digital tape, and if so, what tape format they used. 91% of the participants said they used LTO tape, and in this survey, the balance were using the legacy Oracle tapes. So we've talked about what has been the trends in the media and entertainment storage industry over the past 2 years. And with more in-person work possible now, and with new storage and memory tools, let's talk about what will be possible in the next few years for professional media and entertainment storage. So first of all, the storage hierarchy, the things that we store, the technology we use to store content on are changing. Higher resolution, a higher frame rate, greater dynamic range, and multiple camera projects are increasingly required data rates for rich media workflows. Although hard disk drives, storage can handle many video workloads, solid state drives, or SSDs, are often used for metadata storage and faster access in hard disk drive arrays, and are increasingly used as primary storage for many applications, including some in the media and entertainment industry. There are several media and entertainment applications where NVMe SSDs provide the greatest value. One is to support video projects with 8K plus resolution at high frame rates and high dynamic range. Editing content this large can require 10 gigabytes per second or higher streaming performance at sub 16 millisecond latencies. That can push hard disk drive storage to its limits. And NVMe-based storage with solid state drives has the performance to handle editing raw 8K plus video projects. NVMe SSDs can also be a benefit for visual effects and rendering, especially since these workflows often have intermittent data demand. For instance, in a render farm, all the render engines tend to get new data from storage at about the same time, making the peak bandwidth needed to efficiently service this demand very high. NVMe-based storage can service the high bandwidth intermittent demand for 8K plus resolution rendered content more efficiently than a hard disk drive-based storage system in general. Now, in addition, archiving is another important part of this hierarchy, and magnetic tape is still widely used for archiving media content. However, there are new technologies in the wings that are getting a lot of press right now. For instance, DNA storage may offer a new option for archiving content in the next 5 years or so. Now, working external memory for data processing, including processing of rich media, is typically DRAM, dynamic random access memory. DRAM is often shipped to the processors in dual inline memory modules, called DIMMs, using the double data rate, DDR, or low power, LPDDR interface. Some specialized memory interfaces include high bandwidth memory, HBM, which is used, for instance, for processing on many GPUs, such as those from NVIDIA. DDR and LP DDR DIMMs are used in personal computers and servers, as well as consumer applications to provide memory for individual processors. But that's changing. There's a new memory, an arbitrated switch network memory interface called CXL. It's cache coherent interconnect for processors, can be used for memory expansion and accelerators based upon the PCIe bus, like NVMe is also based on PCIe. CXL also supports memory pooling, with memories having various performance characteristics, such as DRAM and other memory technologies, combined together into a pool. And with the latest CXL version 3.0 specification, which is soon to be implemented in products in the next, say, couple years, we should see a lot more of this. CXL is supported by major industry participants. Server and other computing hardware implementing CXL should be available starting next year. This figure shows how the CXL 3.0 specification permits expanding memory sharing and pooling. And CXL switches allow access by various hosts or allocating pool processors to various memory resources from this memory pool. Point cloud image representation give a more engaging virtual reality experience, but the data rates requirements are high. And these are some images that are actually from that SMPTE conference. For a dynamic point cloud model with 1 million points per frame, each point has 3 10-bit 3D coordinates and 3 8-bit RGB color values, and requires data rates of 1.62 gigabits per second uncompressed at 30 frames per second. And that isn't even a very large or complex model. More advanced features such as reflectance or transparency require additional data, increasing the data rate and storage requirements. At the SMPTE conference, Tom Bohr talked about maybe a way to accelerate the development of light field holographic displays with lower complexity and cost. In this concept, an array of micro lenses allows the display of more light rays at higher intensities, and the micro lens and its pixels are referred to as a Hogel. Now, a practical holographic light field display needs a good depth of field to create a true and useful 3D image. Now, this is possible with this micro lens display by distributing the light rays across these Hogels. And then the other part of that is in the time domain, where you distribute the ray angles over multiple frames. So using the persistence of vision, and this combined together gives you a feeling like there's an actual volumetric object in front of you. Thus, higher frame rates are an important element in this approach. He said that he thought 120 hertz and higher displays may be adequate in order to be able to create this sense of additional reality. But these also, of course, then would be larger storage and bandwidth requirements to be able to display this content. In addition, there's other interesting things going on that may help with sustainability of storage, which I think are important in the industry. The IEEE 2883-2000 specification or standard is the latest standard for media sanitization. Defines sanitization methods and techniques, which is when you can get rid of all the data on a storage device at its end of life or when you're done using it. And it works with all the major storage types, hard disk drive, SSDs, optical, removable, etc. It specifies interface specific techniques with SATA, SAS, or NVMe, for example. The specification can align the industry on terminology and modern techniques for media sanitization, targeting all logical and physical locations for data, including user data, old data, metadata, and over provisioning. The 3 sanitization methods outlined in the specification are called clear, purge, and destruct. The combination of using self-encrypted drives, as is often in solid-state drives, as well as hard disk drives, to ensure data is encrypted throughout the life of the drive can help in terms of security. But using these various purge sanitation methods like crypto and block erase, we can reduce the possibility of recovering any user data down to 0 with verification after the sanitization to ensure no old user data can be read back. Now, this is important, of course, in the media and entertainment industry where our content has value. Now, but if you can do this and you can effectively erase the content, make it unavailable again, then you can help with widespread use of these methods. All storage devices can be safely reused in order to enable a circular economy, continued use of devices, and also keep healthy devices running in the field longer. Another thing about this is at end of life, rather than melting or incinerating the storage devices, if they're still intact, you can recover valuable materials such as hard disk drive, the rare earth magnets. So we talked about trends spawned by the move to remote work in the media and entertainment industry as new memory and storage technologies that are going to drive the movement to higher resolution, higher dynamic range, and higher frame rate content, as well as a move to point cloud images and volumetric image storage. Next, we're going to take a look at projections for the growth of digital storage for professional media and entertainment workflows that are driven by these trends. The industry started to recover from the COVID pandemic lockdowns in 2021, and production work has picked up further in 2022. We expect further growth going forward, again, driven by the size of the content and the amount of content, and helped by increasing efficiency in production and lower costs. The growing use of multi-camera, high dynamic range, higher frame rate, and higher resolution content are going to drive that growth of media content generation and storage capacity requirements. By 2026, the total capacity for content acquisition we estimate to grow to close to 59 exabytes. That's the annual number. Post-production work began recovering also in 2021, as we mentioned. Higher resolution, higher frame rates, and multi-camera projects are going to drive the growth of all storage for post-production to close to 220 exabytes by 2026. You can see that includes cloud, local network storage, as well as local direct attached storage. Collaborative and remote work are driving the use of the cloud for media and entertainment workflows. We believe that this will grow in the coming years, increasing from about $1.5 billion in 2022 to about $3.2 billion by 2026. So in summary, COVID-19 had a big impact on our industry. It shut down or slowed production work and also resulted in a change in the way that people work. Remote work, doing things with virtual sets versus real sets, or going out in the field. And the industry has been recovering from the big impacts in 2020, in 2021 and 2022, and we see that continuing. But remote and virtual production and global collaboration are going to remain common. People are now comfortable with that. They've seen the advantages that can have, as well as its limitations. They can work around those things. And that's going to cause increased use of cloud resources, including storage, which will grow. And new storage and memory technologies are going to enable continued media and entertainment growth. That includes things like CXL, some new memory, non-volatile memory technologies, and various other approaches with NVMe and NVMe over fabrics, et cetera. And new media sanitization specifications could enable a more circular economy in storage devices and systems in our industry. Overall, a continued drive for more immersive content, I believe, will require ever larger amounts of data for media and entertainment projects. Even though we are going to constantly be seeking to reduce the more compression and conserve on storage space, we're still going to use more of it, both on-premise and in the cloud.
Thanks, Tom. That was fantastic, as always. Amazing insights. And, I think it's always important to know, too, that a lot of that information that you're presenting is the result of how you gather the data, right? You're talking to companies and you're talking to the film houses. Do you want to talk just a little bit about how the data gets gathered?
Oh, yeah. So various sources. I talked to people in the industry, back when we could visit things. I visited them, and I'm hoping to do more of that. I mentioned a few things I was able to start doing at the SMPTE Technical Conference in October. That was loads of fun to be able to see people and visit facilities again. And I also keep track of what's going. Things are written up about the industry. People's releases on their products. So I talk to companies that are doing new products, new approaches to things, and new technologies in general. I've always been always found these of value and tried to find out everything I can about these. And so then I put that all together. And also the other thing is a survey that I do.
Right.
And I think this last year, you folks helped in terms of letting people know about the survey. So I want to thank you again.
Yeah, of course.
Great if we could do that again next year as well. But that also helps to guide me in some of the trends that then we use for finding out, how much people are using in the cloud, what kind of storage they're using, what kind of capacities they're requiring, how much analog content they've got that needs to be converted to digital content, what's their conversion rates. That's a pretty extensive report. It's also an important source of information. I also read the technical literature of various sorts that are out there. Go to as many events as I can, a lot of which have been virtual the last 3 years, basically.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping to go to again, be attending more of these in person again. So all these things I put together, then I look at my models, things I've written up on the trends and things in order to put the report together, and then have a result that I can share with the industry. And so I think this is probably the most comprehensive report on use of digital storage and memory in the industry.
Yeah,
So,
agreed. And so given all of that, right, if you kind of look at what we did almost a year ago, right?
yeah.
And then you kind of look at this year's data. Is there anything that jumps out at you that has changed maybe from what was observed from a year ago to now? Really anything, right? Was there any patterns that you saw that sort of changed significantly from what we were seeing last year that might have either validated what you were already thinking, right? And what the data was sort of pointing to, or maybe has evolved some and has maybe even slightly changed?
Yeah. So, and again, there's many factors in this. One was the only way people could work back in most of 2020 was if they were doing it remotely.
Right.
And that really drove the use of the cloud, drove people having to equip their office or whatever they were using, to do that remote work. I think it also helped accelerate collaborative work. If you could do in the cloud if you put things in the cloud, you could work around the clock. I think it's led to some greater efficiencies in the industry, using virtual sets. There's already trends that were out there before the pandemic of doing virtual sets for various production work, but I think it became even more common and continues today. On the other hand, things are getting a little easier for people to travel. So there is getting to be, going back to some of the where we worked on set in an actual location versus a simulation of a location. But I think we're going to see longer term trends that we're going to be using more of these virtual sets. Even though people can now travel and stuff, we're going to be doing more stuff in camera, more things direct to the cloud, and more use of artificial intelligence. And part of that's driven by the economics of it. Part of it's driven by the developments in the technology. And right now, I'm noticing that there's a lot of like the streaming services are, reformatting what the production that they're making, getting rid of some shows, bringing in new ones. I think these technologies have provided new flexibility for creative people as well as those that manage creative work. That you can have, if you do this right, and that's the trick also, is getting used to the discipline you have to have with some of these new methods to use them effectively. That if you can do that, you can be very productive. You can turn things off and turn things on more quickly. You can get stuff, again, if you doing things right, that you can get things out there. And the other thing I think is for artistic folks is there's new technologies and methods to create new, more immersive content, things that engage more with people. And particularly as we move into some of these extended reality ideas, that sort of thing, or holographic or volumetric displays of various sorts. Right now, the technology is kind of clunky for people to experience this, but I think that we're going to end up with changes in technology and distribution, and in general, just the way we interact with the world, that'll be mitigated by machines and technology, artificial intelligence that gives us information about the world around us. And that will also come into use, I think, in media and entertainment applications, where we're sort of finding new ways of extending reality, our experience of the world around us, our understanding of the world around us, maybe our understanding of ourselves, but also new ways to entertain ourselves. And so I think this technology is going to make that's going to be some of the biggest trends in the future are going to be new, using these technologies, virtual landscapes, CGI, and more volumetric content, maybe even engaging more of our senses than sound and visual, and what that could do for the future.
Yeah, agreed. I think the trends you highlighted around virtual production are extremely interesting, and the way in which people are going to leverage the scenes that ultimately get projected onto those screens is really interesting. The way in which they're gathering that information, and then, like you said, maybe even using AI to sort of fill in some of the gaps, right, and scene changes and that. And then there's just AI for sort of day-to-day use, right? Like augmenting the data enhancement, or
just helping you with your workflows,
Yeah. It's it's really starting to become reality, right? We've talked about it, it feels like, for a long time, but I agree. I think AI and machine learning is really starting to actually turn into actual features that people can take advantage of in day-to-day production. So
But it also leads to new challenges. For instance, deep fake technology can now essentially create artificial actors or recreate somebody, so what are the rights, what are going to be the rights for use of either artificial characters or recreating somebody, a character that's not alive anymore, things of that sort. So there's new challenges, new opportunities, and it's new ways for us to entertain us, but also new challenges in particular on what is true, what is not true. And we know that from just general things that are going on in the world around us, that it's sometimes becoming increasingly hard to figure that out. We need to find new methods for verification. And it's great if you're being entertained, but on the other hand, you don't want to be misled.
Yeah, no, it's true. And ethics, integrity, all of those
Yes.
things are just incredibly important. And like you said, it's becoming more and more difficult to tell what is real and what isn't anymore. It's on the one hand, it's cool. On the other hand, it's frightening to think about where it'll all be 10, 20 years from now.
Yes, yeah.
So
we need to make sure that the artificial intelligence we're creating think kindly of us and think of us as collaborators versus competition.
Exactly. The robot uprising is happening.
Yes.
All right. So in terms of things that are still, common, right, in terms of what's driving storage adoption, right? Can you talk a little bit about that, right? Because there are things that are just consistent, right, over the life of your report that still are critical in terms of how people are thinking of storage, and more importantly, what's driving that consumption.
Well, there's a general digitization, and this industry has been involved in digital transformation for for at least 2 decades now.
Yeah.
That increasingly the stuff we capture and create is digital. Yeah. And that has led, and that has lowered the cost. Film used to require a fair amount of money to be able to develop it, and there were delays in getting it. Now you can get things instantly. You can add more at very little extra cost. It's just just getting more media, more storage. And so it's the general trend is people are capturing more content to make content, or generating more content to make more content, and they can and then the other thing is how much of that we end up keeping, because that content, once created, we might be able to reuse. In particular, if it includes actors or scenes, those can change from one moment to the other. So if you want to keep something true to the person or to the location, keeping that content long term has value, particularly in this industry, where oftentimes we'll reuse things, whether it's in news, or broadcast, or it's in franchised videos and various sorts. So there's the amount of stuff we capture is increasing, the resolution and the amount of information that's in the video and audio associated with individual frames has been increasing. Higher dynamic range adds a bit more, potentially could double the capacity depending on how you do it, of the frames you capture. Higher resolution, higher frame rates, all these things generally increase the storage capacity, increase the bandwidth, and that's going to be a long-term trend. I don't see that ending. Having higher bandwidth storage available, and more storage capacity that can deal with that, as well as lower cost storage for keeping content longer term, are still going to be valid concepts that are going to continue. So I think we're going to generate more content. It's going to be more capacity. We're going to want to use these new technology tools to more adequately manage that technology, to be able to reuse it, find it, to reuse it. We're going to need to curate it and keep it for the long term. And some of these trends are going to continue. On the other hand, some of the challenges continue as well, which is how do you keep data for 100 years or more, for example? We still have challenges in that. You have to continually move it from one media to another in general to be able to do that. Some people are good at that, some of them aren't.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, right? That one's like the question of all questions, right? What are the formats logical to basically encapsulate content and keep it for the long term? That one's
well, you've got the whole technical obsolescence issue. That the fact that we are creating these technologies so fast means that something in a format that's 10 or 15 years old, you may have a hard time finding a way to access that anymore. So can we create stuff that sort of encapsulates in the metadata how you can recreate the format, that you can sort of like, you can recreate the means of viewing the video incorporated with the video in a standard fashion, in a standard that allows you to, to be able to go back in time essentially, but make it into a format that you can now read. So
Yeah.
how can we build the history of digital imaging into the metadata so you can recreate any content?
Yeah. Still a challenge, right?
There's still challenges there. Yeah. And I think there's efforts and standardization efforts that are going on to try to do this. But, that plus, again, managing content and in general, so it's there, and then being able to access it are going to be continuing challenges. And if you put something in DNA, the DNA itself may last for hundreds, thousands of years. But again, if you don't build a way to access that, to find the way to access that data, whatever the format is going to be, you may have the data, but you don't know how to get it.
That's so true. All right. So one of the other things you mentioned was, because of the pandemic, the change in terms of the workforce and the distributed nature in which people started not only having to work, but then even after the pandemic has subsided, how just generally speaking, some aspects of the community are really embracing that distributed nature, right? Because of how well it worked, right?
Yeah, I can work from anywhere, right?
Yeah. And that was an eye opener, I think, for many, right? And I think it's helped a lot, right, in terms of some of the work-life balance pieces, and or you could even argue environmentally, right? Less people potentially driving their cars down the 101 freeway, right, to get to a set. But in terms of things that you've heard from customers in terms of how that has changed or evolved, maybe some of their thinking around, cloud versus on-prem storage solutions, and how do you extend, right, your environment into a cloud, and or vice versa, right, so that you can realize some of those efficiencies, cater to that distributed workforce, while at the same time have that integrity you need, right, in both places, right, with all the information available, right, so that people can basically do their work.
Yeah, I see the cloud as an important element. Another thing is that there is a trend towards use of multiple clouds. Different things are of lower cost or greater, capabilities people want on one cloud versus another. And so I think there's a lot more emphasis on people using more than one cloud service. There's a lot of work going on colo versus, in your own facility. But on the other hand, there's also a need for local storage of network or direct attach, oftentimes for individual products, is because the data rates are so high. And the latency requirements are so good. So doing things locally is still going to be needed. You're just going to need local storage of one sort or another in many cases. We're going to see a greater variety of managing your use of the cloud, because the cloud can be a cost-effective way of doing things if it's managed right. And otherwise it can be a drain on, continuing drain. That's the issue, the trade-offs between doing things with the CapEx versus OpEx, right?
Yeah.
OpEx, you're charged as you use stuff, but you want to therefore use it effectively and only pay for what you need at the time, and avoid extra charges. And so and that leads to various cloud offerings that are out there with different people charge for different things. Different people have different capabilities. And so folks are actually, where do they actually store stuff? And that may actually drive some need for local or locally controlled storage that you own in some fashion, even if it's in a colo facility, versus things that are in the cloud. And the other thing that's changing is that a lot of the folks that are actually established storage system companies are now selling their storage as if it were in the cloud. In other words, you pay as you go versus buying up front. So we've seen a lot of changes in the industry, in the business environment, and in the way that people are where they're putting their content in order to more effectively do the things they need to do in order to be able to meet the needs of these workflows, but also to control their costs and to have more efficient workflows.
Yeah, subscription for sure. Seeing a lot of that, right, for storage, which is like you said, emerging. Some of the benefits for that, of course, being that if you don't necessarily have the money to do the old style CapEx purchase of, say, a storage system, you could potentially then just go the subscription route and get access to a system that maybe in the past you would not have been able to have access to. And yet at the same time, if you're an established organization, there's challenges longer term around subscription, right? In terms of what happens to the content and all that good stuff. So yeah, that's a great point.
Ownership, control of the content. That's another aspect of this. So I think it's going to continue to drive all types of storage, but with a lot of stuff that's going to be shared.
Yeah, agreed. So the other cool thing that you mentioned and talked about earlier on in your presentation was sort of the emergence, I should say, of virtualized environments, and sort of how people are really gravitating towards that because of the fact that, the race is always on to deliver high quality content. And if you can do it in a more efficient manner, certainly leveraging virtual sets provides a number of benefits. So do you think, though, that's going to have an impact on storage and storage use? And if so, how?
So anytime you make it easier to do something, it gets it. And if you have the time, it's tempting to do more, to shoot more, right? And therefore, it's probably going to have, it may have actually, if I'm spending less time traveling, more time doing production, I'm going to generate more storage. So I think actually it accelerates the demand for your storage. For a given show, you may not, or a given production, you may not use more storage, but you're going to use more of it over a shorter period of time, just because you can be more efficient, potentially with these new technologies. The other thing is, I think that some of these technologies could be tied into things you can do in a studio that are going to be harder to do in a field in terms of in-camera work. And therefore, it may accelerate that kind of workflows in particular. Not necessarily restricted, but going direct to cloud. If you're out in the field, you can have challenges in terms of connectivity. So, but if you're in a studio with a high bandwidth connection, those things are probably going to be a bit easier to do.
Yeah, for sure. All right, I'm going to ask one more question, then we'll open it up to others. In terms of looking forward, right, as you spend your time, right, looking at what's happening in the industry, is there anything that you see potentially on the horizon that will further impact either storage use, given any technologies you're keeping an eye on?
Well, I think one thing is it's becoming easy for a lot of people to get into making their own content. We saw that with the streaming guys. On the other hand, there's only so many eyeballs and so much time available. So I think one of the things we're running into is and again, increase in number of users and viewers can help on that. But is how much content will the market be able to support long term? Of what kind of content? How are we going to consume it? People only have so much time in the day, and generally they have to work. So in entertainment content may be a certain limit on that. And I think we're starting to see some of the studios right now. It seems like they're changing the approaches they're making on these things. I think to deal with that, and the shows come on and off really fast. But the other side of that is, have fans for particular things, and it may be easier for them to essentially sort of create a subscription that could, that actually, and you could have new channels that could have this content be continued because you got people that are willing to support it to have it be continued. That's another possibility I think could happen. So I think we're going to, the net is, I think we're going to see more stuff made in more different ways in more places. And available in more venues and applications. And I think that also, as you open up to call it the metaverse or extended reality approaches of various sorts, there's going to be whole new ways in which we're going to be interacting with content, with the world around us, but also with content as well. And so it'll be really interesting, I think, to see where that leads us to.
Yeah, agreed. And it's funny because during the pandemic, right, more was better, right, at the time, and even though it struggled to create new content, there just wasn't enough, it seemed, right, because people had time, right?
They had oodles of time,
right. And now they're coming out of the pandemic, and so now, like you said, I think streaming companies are saying, okay, subscription levels have maybe changed because people don't have as much time, so maybe people aren't subscribing as much as maybe they were to as many services at the same time. And then there's the fact that, the quality of the content, right, is
Mhm.
becoming more critical. It always is, right, in terms of
Yes.
competitive.
Yeah, but I also see the possibility, for instance, of a sort of crowdsourced content in a way. I mean, you already have this in some of the streaming, some of the social services, but even a more professional side of that, if people are fans of something, if we can bring the cost down for making that content, could they actually sort of buy into it?
Yeah.
Potentially new types of production, new types of studios and business models, I think are a possibility.
Yeah, very cool. It's really an exciting time to be in
Yes.
this business for sure.